Hey y'all. I think we're on here on air. You
Perfect.
caught the end of a popular topic, I'm sure, for many people this week, the American political system. We are Jess and I were just comparing notes. We're going to be back together again if you can't get enough Jess and I for the Now of Work live stream tomorrow, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Really looking forward to that conversation. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about strategic learning and crafting a business decision approach, or business driven rather approach to learning and development. This is a great topic, I think, for the both of us, because I know that learning and obviously the conversation around skills is such a passion area for both Jess and I. So we'll go ahead and do a quick round of introductions. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping. We would love for you all to participate in today's session. We have the chat going. We can see your chat. Jess is going to be in the chat participating. I'll do my best to pull questions out of the chat. It would be so great if you could start off by sharing, where you're joining us from today. And of course, if there's any questions that are already top of mind for you on this topic. As I said, we would love to hear from you. So please keep those questions coming in, interact with each other as you see fit. You can all read each other's chats in that window. And my team is also going to be pushing a couple of polls as we go through here, just for us to get a sense of how we should steer this conversation. This event is live, which means that we can and we can take this conversation sort of wherever we want. We have some pre-prepared questions that we're ready to discuss, but we really do want to hear from all of you in the chat. Thank you so much for participating. And great to see that we have lots of L&D leaders on today.
Love it.
Shout out to the few of you who said the panelists. Thank you for hyping up Jess and I. Great ego boost for a little bit of a down week here. So thank you so much, team, for sharing in the poll there why you're here today. I'll go ahead and end that and start sharing the results to you if I can. I think we're going in and out. All right. So we're here to be focused primarily on L&D today. As I said, we'll go ahead and start just with a bit of introduction if you don't know Jess and I. Jess, why don't you go ahead and tell our friends here who you are, your pronouns, your where you work, and where you're calling from today, where you're based out of, and what sort of your interest in this topic is.
Well, I love it. And thank you all for spending an hour of your precious and important time with us. I love this conversation. I love that we get to talk about, by the way, I love that we get to talk about people. Yes, it's learning, but we're talking about people and what they need and deserve, which is to be supported through their career development, and learning is a great way to do that. So I love, love, love showing up for conversations like this, because I've been in the industry my whole career. I started in the talent space 23 years ago. I was a practitioner. I went to the vendor side because I became obsessed with designing better experiences for people, not solutions, not technology, experiences to help people thrive at work. And now I work at Mercer. I am part of our HR transformation business, which is helping enterprises digitalize and innovate and move forward in the employee journeys, candidate experiences, the impact HR is trying to have for the business. As part of that, I also play a market-facing role. I'm an analyst. I work as an advisor directly to some of the solution providers in the space. And so I wear a few different hats in support of that goal, which is to make work better for people. I'm in Minneapolis and the sun is shining today. It's amazing. We're having a beautiful fall here in Minneapolis, and I'm the mom to 3 incredible girls. I also run a nonprofit called Diverse Daisies, which is all about empowering girls, and my pronouns are she and her.
Thanks, Jess. For folks who don't know me, my name is Sarah Reynolds. My pronouns are they and them. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at the HR technology company HiBob. HiBob is HCM tech that's built for all of you, the types of modern strategic HR leaders who really care about people, really prioritize people. And when you're thinking about this important topic like learning, you're probably thinking, as Jess said, about people first. We really want to dive into that, and I think more today. I love the topic of learning because it's about people, because we know that investing in learning is something that ultimately helps us, create the right talent for our organization, help people grow and succeed in their own careers, reach those achievements that they want to reach. We also know it's one of the most frequently cited sort of retention drivers for organizations, which I think is so important for us to consider. But I think that, it's a complex topic because it's not just about, investing in people. It's also at the intersection of investing in what's right for the business. So as we dive in here, I think we're going to explore that relationship a little bit more. Just as a reminder for everybody who's on the line today, we are going to record the call. This will be available to you afterwards. We also have some great resources that'll be made available to you if you're thinking about the questions that we're sort of raising here today. Team HiBob is also in the chat here to answer any questions that you might have, as is, I think, Team Mercer. So please feel free to reach out to our teams and ask away. So Jess, why don't we go ahead and just dive right in, because we want to get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. So let's talk a little bit about like learning initiatives and their value to the business. There's lots of different types of learning that you can encourage in your organization, and there's probably a lot of demands for learning in your organization. But can you sort of share your thoughts on, like, why, especially now, why is learning so critical to the business?
Oh my gosh, that is a big question. Okay, so we're at a moment, I feel like we're at a huge inflection point. This has always been true, but it's like 10 times truer than it's ever been, that stagnancy is the kiss of death for business. We've never seen things move and change faster, period, end of story. And that's true today. It will be twice as true tomorrow. Like, the pace of change is increasing so fast. I know we hear that all the time, but literally, if you're standing still, you are actively dying as a business. When you think about your workforce, you also have to think about ways to make it agile and responsive and flexible to the business needs, not just today, but what will the business need in a couple of years or in 5 years? Where's the organization going? And how can we constantly be thinking about creating, shaping, nurturing, supporting a workforce that's not just, that can't just be fully activated. To have a fully activated, well-deployed workforce today, challenging enough. To constantly be thinking about how it can evolve and constantly be in support of a changing business is like, it's I don't know, it's like trying to catch something that's like blowing in the wind. And so it's a real challenge. These aren't like just words. Workforce agility isn't just a word. It's not just a concept that sounds good in practice. It's a real strategic need for the business to have a suitable workforce that isn't just made up of people, humans doing, one-to-one assigned jobs, but humans and machines and all of the ways work can get done as we move forward. It's a real challenge, and it makes learning, again, if kind of standing still is the kiss of death, you have to think about how to get people sort of forward moving and build momentum, and how to constantly build people, which means building their skills, and learning as a strategic initiative to get you there.
We recently launched Bob Learning, which is our LMS module that connects to our HRIS Bob. And one of the things that we heard from clients when we started digging in on their learning journey and their journey to connect learning to the business was that one of the things they find very quickly is that there's almost 3 levels of learning in an organization, or 3 primary desires for learning in the organization. There's what employees really want to learn. There's what managers want their direct employees to learn. And then there's also what the business wants employees to learn. And especially as, the conversation about, I made it 9 minutes in without saying AI, especially as the conversation about AI heats up, we're seeing maybe sometimes some fragmentation between what employees want to learn, what skills they want to develop, what their managers want, and ultimately what the business wants. Can you tell us a little bit about, are you seeing that in your practice, and how do you maybe overcome this widening gap between, executives who are talking about AI and skills of the future and skills-driven organization, and employees who are like, hey, I'm not there yet. I want to learn something that's really directly applicable to something day to day in my job.
Oh my gosh. I actually have these slides up to the side here because Mercer just did research. Our first ever research that's impact on the workforce related to HR technology. And it's fantastic. And it's sort of asking workers themselves of every, from frontline to knowledge workers, from, it's US only for now, but it'll be repeated globally next year. And it's astounding. It's not surprising, but it's astounding at the same time, the gap that you just referred to, and specific to skill attainment. Like, let's not muddy too many words here, but we are talking about skill attainment at the end of the day. If you're aligning learning strategy with business performance, you're really looking for gaps. Like, what do people know how to do? What do we need tomorrow? Like, you're trying to sort all of that out. And I see I'm still chuckling at John's comment, working on an L&D project, trying to establish a learning culture for a purpose. I would imagine you're trying to establish that culture for good reason, So far, very few responses to the skills audit, and there's no training budget. Other than that, it's going well. Because that's a little bit of the gap that we're talking about. So our research showed that people do not, and I'm going to look at my slides here, email me if you want these slides to make your business case, by the way. Most people don't feel supported by their managers at work.
Right.
So that learning culture that John is referring to, they don't actually, especially if they're frontline hourly workers, they don't feel a sense of permission to spend time learning at work. They also don't see leadership by example. If we're not all spending time learning and developing ourselves, acquiring new skills that are important to us, but they're also important to the business, if we don't establish that from top down and actually create time and provide resources to do it, to make it true, then it doesn't mean anything. We're just paying lip service to a concept that sounds good. Better yet, if we put teeth in it to say, you'll be evaluated, like your performance actually is grounded in how you're moving yourself forward in support of organizational goals. So your ability to acquire new skills, to learn something that's valuable for you in the business, to make yourself a higher performing asset, that'll become part of the evaluation and the coaching that we do for you. Like, you've got to put teeth in this all the way around, or it doesn't really mean anything. So the fact that sort of number one stat is that most employees don't feel supported by their manager in pursuit of learning goals, nor do they know what's important to the business. So again, unless you're articulating a top-down strategy that this is how we need the workforce to perform, these are the skills that requires, these are the learning and career development pathways, which might include mentorship. Like, there's lots of ways you can put this together. This is the way we're going to support you to do that. Unless we see that and it's clearly articulated to us, we don't know why it matters. We don't trust that it's going to matter. And the other part I'll add, unless we see direct correlation that upskilling and improving myself, pursuing learning in support of better business performance, if that doesn't translate to pay and promotion, again, we're not putting the rubber is not meeting the road. We're not putting our money where our mouth is unless we help all of these things correlate. Tell me what matters and why. Make me see the proof of doing this for myself and show me why it matters to the business. This is going to help drive business performance. Great, I'm all in.
Yeah. There's a couple of comments in the chat here, which I think are really great. Creating time is so key. Creating that protected time and giving permission is so key, right? The managers are skeptical because there isn't a budgeted amount of time that people recommend. This is a great, I think, really tactical example of where L&D can change the conversation. If you have executive buy-in from your management that learning is important, get executive buy-in that a certain amount of time is what's the organizational standard, because otherwise what you're doing is you're requiring each of those managers to figure it out on their own, or to make their own sort of negotiation up the chain in their organization. And you're going to end up with discrepancies and different amounts of time that have been allocated to protected time for learning, right? So it's a really, I think, great call out from the chat, but this is an opportunity for all of us to be thinking about, hey, as the folks who are having the global conversation, the holistic conversation, we have a role to play in setting a threshold or setting a tolerance or setting whatever your managers want to call that, right? Setting up that protected time for learning and getting that executive buy-in right from the very beginning.
And tie it to the business. Like if your organization has a learning day, for example, or you do pretend, you know, you say, okay, yes, you can use so many hours per week or per month or whatever to go grab some learning courses that, you know, that feel important to you. That feels like a volunteer day or a well-being day, a mental health day. Like, okay, go ahead, like a benefit. Go ahead and take advantage of this perk. Oh my God, if you are literally not tying this to business performance and saying, no, you must. I mean, you could take it as far as Google and say 20% of your time should be spent doing stuff that interests and excites you, because that leads to business innovation. Because when people do this, we get new product ideas, or we move the needle on, you know, on this program or that program. Like, unless you're correlating it to why it matters for the business, if it's just sort of like, go ahead and take a course, you know, then you're just saying compliance-driven training is required, so we have to check those boxes, and the rest of it is whatever is interesting and curious to you. Of course, people aren't going to feel enabled and empowered to do that if they don't understand that it leads to business performance and it leads to my own advancement possibilities in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've been talking a lot about how to make engagement surveys work harder for folks. I mean, lots of organizations have engagement surveys. They frequently run with the very same questions time after time. But if you're not asking about the support for learning in your organization as you go to launch some of these programs, I think it's a really great opportunity for you to think about how to make that engagement survey work harder for you and get a sense from your organization already about how they see your culture of learning, or how they see the support for learning coming from management, because it's just another sort of talking point that you can add in that toolbox to go back and say, listen, you know, as much as we are saying prioritize learning, it's not a perk, it's a really fundamental business imperative, right? We're shifting the narrative in executive communication or in communication from our friends in L&D, but we're not actually seeing that represented in the field with how our managers are treating learning as an inconvenience, or the one that I hate, which is, well, but what if they develop a skill that makes them able to go get another job? It's really interesting. I think the sort of like nuances that come out when you start getting into that real fundamental relationship, that it's not really the talent or the learning team has with learning, it's that managers have with learning in your organization.
Yeah, I think this really boils down to how you view talent. You have to have a little bit of a belief system at an executive level that's aligned, everybody generally agrees, on how you view talent as resources, as, you know, how you plan to activate and move them in the organization, how you support those strategies. And I find that when we get into specific conversations like learning or mobility, what you just mentioned about managers, it's often not a cultural norm to enable talent to the point that they might leave you, hiring manager or team or business division or line of business. We tend to hoard high-performing talent, right? And we think they're our asset. And instead of thinking about people as an organizational asset that should be enriched and made more valuable over time. And the proof of that, an outcome of that, is that they probably will move about the organization. They should be assigned to higher value work or the most important project where their skill is the most valuable at that moment in time. So this idea of sort of letting them go and like building them to lose them, if that's not an agreed upon, and when I say lose them inside your company, please. Otherwise, you will lose into competition, into the open market. So be willing to lose them inside the company to where they're most needed and most valuable. If you haven't agreed on that as a mindset, as a as a way you think about building talent, then all of your learning strategies are going to, again, we tend to execute tactics that aren't in alignment with business strategy. And that's when we see adoption fall short and employees don't know, sort of the what's in it for me, or the for what, like the so what sort of factor falls short if you don't have that articulation down.
Yeah. An old COO friend of mine used to say, talent is probably one of the only assets in your organization that appreciates in value. You buy a piece of equipment, you buy office space, maybe like you buy chairs and desks and computers and all these other things, and they depreciate in value over time. Talent is the opposite, right? I think that's so important to have that as part of your like fundamental culture and fundamental understanding. We've sort of we've danced around it, right? The importance of making a business case and tying learning outcomes to business outcomes. I think all of us, as smart L&D leaders, we know that when we typically look in like an LMS or an LXP, a lot of the metrics that we're seeing, especially when it's disconnected from, core HR data, or especially when it's disconnected from business data, a lot of the metrics you get out of those types of solutions, they're standalone. They're about course completion rates, or about pass-fail percentages, or about engagement time, right? Which are all really interesting, I think, intellectually to look at. But when you're investing in learning, how do you think about tying your learning initiatives back to those business metrics and the business outcomes that ultimately your executives in your organization are looking for?
Yeah, I would, and lots of you already know this, but I would focus on what you can measure. And we do know that there's direct correlation and significant impact on your ability to attract the right talent and the best talent. And then, of course, your ability to keep them engaged, keep them, but also keep them happy, to keep them engaged at work, and then to retain them over the long run. And I would also add other metrics you can track. Do they become more promotable? Are they more eligible, for succession planning scenarios? Do they become, sort of a multi-purpose, a utility player, or can you do more with people when you think about their nurturing and development and their pathing and their, so think about all of the things that you can measure that show how people can be higher performing, how teams can be higher performing, how work can be better managed and work outcomes better achieved. So think about speak the language of the business. Think about all of the things that can happen better, or time to value can be achieved faster. But also think about the cost of doing nothing. If we don't do these things, the following things, start happening, and literally tie your strategies to achievement of those outcomes. Yes, we're talking about ROI, and use the stuff that feels obvious, but also talk about the stuff that's a little bit bigger picture. And again, I hate talking about people like appreciating or depreciating assets, but I don't mind if you talk about me as an appreciating asset. Let's go ahead and make that happen.
I appreciate it.
Yes, exactly. But I really like going back to like paint. We have to do a little bit of future of work stuff here. And this is where talent strategists, HR practitioners, HR leaders for the business, like lean into the stuff that and you read about, and like and tell that story for the business, because they're not thinking about it every day like you are. The fact that today's skills, like what the skills that we have and need today, what that's going to look like, the jobs that are going to go away, the tasks that are going to be automated, entire industries that will change by 2030, like paint the picture to give this a little bit of urgency about what's actually happening to the global workforce. 2025 will be the super age. We'll have more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18. Does that have impact to workforce demographics over time? Wow. Yeah. And a lot faster than people are thinking about. And what's the skill set of those people over the age of 65? And the fact that they're staying in the workforce longer than they did before for lots of other macro trend reasons. Like, paint a little bit of this picture to show what happens if you don't create ways to develop and prepare people for the future workforce and for what your business needs them to look like. it doesn't, you've got to kind of do the hard ROI stuff for your business case, but painting that picture makes it compelling and gives it urgency. And it gives you credibility, honestly. Like we keep talking about HR being, tactical and kind of mired in transactions. And we're very, kind of cumbersome, laden function with all this compliance requirements and stuff like that. When everybody knows that we're supposed to be better, more strategic advisors to the business, we just haven't created that for ourselves. This is one of those topics where you should absolutely be owning that conversation.
Yeah. Someone wrote in a private Q&A, I feel we're back to pre-COVID mentality. So covering things like employee needs or upskilling or learning and development programs has lost importance along with, things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. That's a real shame, especially when I think that the conversation about things like AI and about broader disruption and about all of these workforce demographic things that Jess is mentioning has really actually given HR, even if you work in a compliance-driven function or a function where you don't maybe feel that your business recognizes your strategic nature or the amount that you can be strategic in your business, I think now is an invitation to participate in that conversation. Because as somebody who sits in executive conversations all day long, I can tell you that it's one of the very top things on everyone's agenda. And it's one of the very top things on board agendas. So if you're not helping to provide an answer, unfortunately, we start seeing things like, it's business planning season for many of us. You start seeing things like leaders, operational leaders, making decisions that don't necessarily reflect what you as smart HR people would counsel, right? I had a client who was telling me a story about how she was starting to see business presentations for next fiscal year that said, we're going to eliminate entire departments and it's all going to be, based on AI and we don't need all these people. And she said, whoa, 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 whoa. First of all, is the pace of technological innovation keeping up with that idea? Have you tested your ability to service clients, to fulfill these functions, to do the work of these teams with the AI? Or is this like a dream that you're just sort of bringing to the table? And then last but not least, and most importantly, for those of us who work in people-centric organizations, you don't need to eliminate that talent. You need to change that talent or change the roles that talent is maybe taking in the organization today, or maybe that the jobs that those folks have are fundamentally changing. But you're talking about a group of people, right? And their livelihoods and a group of valuable people to our organization. What else can we do with that talent beyond planning, some sort of major riff based on a hope that AI is going to cover, whatever this function is? There's an incredible opportunity for us to talk about that talent mobility piece, I think, in, being able to shift that talent to something that, okay, if we take your thesis that, this role is going to be disruptive, let's figure out how we shift that talent to something that's going to be much, much more valuable to the business. I think from an HR perspective, like, as HR leaders, that's something that you have the ability to input into in this broader executive conversation. And it's something that maybe your broader executive peers, I'm a CMO, I work in the business, I'm allowed to say it. Maybe they're not thinking about it. Maybe they're not best suited to think about it. Maybe they're under different pressures in their organizations. You got to get in there, right? And it requires you to sort of invite yourself a little bit to that conversation.
Yeah, and trust yourself as the expert voice. Everybody else has their remit to be thinking about. So it's okay that they're not thinking about strategic talent planning every single day, but you should be, and you are. And so this is where we can move out of the react mode, constantly reacting. Poor HR and talent people are usually the last to find out about some big thing that impacts the workforce, and they have to go figure out how to hire a bunch of people really fast or riff a bunch of people tomorrow. Yep. And then next year you have 100 recs open for, well, didn't we have those people last year? Like, the fact that we keep doing this it drives me absolutely bonkers. We're a little wasteful when it comes to how we think about talent for business. There's a lot of churn and burn that happens if we just slowed down to go fast and thought a little further ahead, then we can have those talent strategy conversations. And now it is a buy, build, borrow, bot conversation. Does that job get done the same way in 2 years that it did today? If it's a customer service or call center agent, or if it's an administration role, or if it's the chances are high that some of these jobs themselves are going to transform. But when you think about all of the people in the business and the skills they can contribute and the value they can add, that sort of redeployment and reactivation of talent based on where the business is going and the way technology is changing the way work gets done. That's like, you have to sort of find a way to have these conversations in parallel so that you can advise the business on how to shape the right workforce. And I promise you that's going to include learning strategies, because the skills are changing too fast. Work is changing too fast. The nature of jobs and the tasks that individuals perform versus what's going to be automated by machines. It's all changing too fast. And so you have to keep pace with this by advising talent strategies that are going to keep a workforce fit for purpose.
Yeah.
There was a question in the Q&A that I want to touch on. What about managers getting better training and becoming better managers? This is where I love the conversation of AI and automation. I think there is such a huge opportunity to better support managers by feeding them, literally, sort of reading the tea leaves a little bit better in terms of how people are working, the value they're providing, or the gaps in value that we're sort of missing out on, the coaching and development conversations, just aligning people to be doing the most important work at the right moment in time. So much of that is super transactional, and like poor managers, like they're constantly reacting, they're always behind the 8 ball. And so if AI and automation can help not just automate sort of repetitive stuff so that we don't get bogged down in a lot of transactional stuff, and we can focus more time on strategic talent activation and coaching and aligning to the business, I think managers will be really well supported in this AI wave that, it's not coming for people. It's maybe coming for some of our tasks, but I think we should be thinking about as an incredibly powerful assistant to help managers spend more time on higher value activities with their teams and people in support of the business, like less noise, less messy work, manual stuff, more time coaching and advising people themselves and overall talent strategies.
Yeah, when we set out to build, this LMS at Bob, right? Obviously, AI was on the brain. Obviously, this conversation that we're having about how the half-life for technical skills is kind of shrinking over time as the pace of innovation gets faster and faster. But it's like these durable, human skills and manager skills that are so important to our organizations. We thought about like, how do you connect learning back to the work that the managers are doing every day? And, one great example, I think, is like in the performance cycle. Wouldn't it be great if when you gave a performance review and you identified, hey, this employee has a skill gap, or, hey, there's something the organization wants this person to learn, right? You could help identify really quickly, well, what's the right learning content that I should plug them into? And then you could actually figure out, well, did they engage with the learning that I asked them to? That's where you get to some of the basic metrics about, time and course completion and attainment rate and stuff, right? But then you can plug that data back into the next performance conversation, or even to your one-on-ones, and say, hey, they took that training. Did I see the outcome I wanted of closing that skill gap? Whether you're teaching them something hard or soft, right? And I don't like calling them soft skills, but I think that's colloquially, how we sort of refer to them. Like durable human skills is maybe a better, more strategic way, right?
I like that, Amanda.
Essential skills. Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. Like, I need to up my vocab game here, right? But did it work? They took they engaged with the learning I recommended to them, or AI helped me to recommend to them. Did it work? Did I actually see an improvement in their performance? And then ultimately, did I see an improvement in my whole team's performance, the organization's performance? Did I tie it back to something that, hey, we wanted the teams to learn more about, how to automate maybe some of this manual work in their area of focus. They've done that. this is what we were able to unlock. And I think that that's a really critical piece of this conversation about, AI. It's the piece of conversation about, the importance of interconnectivity of, learning data and performance data or business data or talent data more broadly. But I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for AI to start surfacing insights to managers to say, hey, you recommended that somebody take some learning and get really great at, doing a couple of new essential skills that are really, really hot for them as a maybe first-time manager, but we're not actually seeing them engage in that learning. Can we nudge them? Can the AI nudge them? Can you nudge them as the people manager? Can you ask them, why they're not engaging or if they're not getting value from that? Can you ask them for their feedback on the training that they did take, and how they see, their opportunity to keep moving on this subject? I think it's a really great call out that's, something that is on the very near future of what these types of solutions like Bob is going to be able to do for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the behavior modification thing, number one, just the insights, like where are the gaps and what fills the gaps, and did that directly affect performance? Like did the math work out? And I think back to communication, I think the business communicating where it's going, what that will require of the workforce, and how that translates to learning and development and skill attainment opportunities.
Yep.
That's the biggest thing we're missing. And there's a comment in the chat about training managers first. That first needs to be a business strategy and a leadership conversation. And gosh, we're so terrible sometimes at stopping long enough to just tell people where we're going and what matters. Otherwise, I could be sitting here and I know what's interesting to me, and I think I should maybe spend some time going and taking this grant writing course because I have an opportunity to support a project. If that is not a long-term skill that's going to be, then I'll probably pick the skill up differently. I can YouTube something in the moment just to get a thing done and off my desk. Or if this is a critical business skill and this is where the business is going and we need more people who can do this kind of work, like that's a way different strategy. That back to the person who put a comment in the chat, like I'm trying to establish a learning culture. Why? Your business is probably changing really fast. Maybe you're growing through a lot of acquisition and M&A. Maybe you've understood and evaluated the fact that your workforce is stagnant and doesn't have that. Like, I would be so curious to know, why do you think you need a learning culture? You feel like it's going to do something to move people in the business forward. And that's the part that we need to be better at from a leadership perspective, of sort of explaining the why and the so what. So then people can act and execute accordingly. And then again, put teeth in it everywhere, make managers accountable for it, evaluate me and my individual performance against that, and make pay and promotion follow. You've got to put teeth in these initiatives.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about, different ways or different approaches of building a business case, but maybe just to recap for folks, because I know this was a very popular sort of topic in the chat as well. When we talk about building a business case for learning, there's lots of different levels that we have sort of called out today. We've called out, the importance of, not stopping at just standalone LMS LMS metrics, right? You want to connect it back to the people data that you probably already have at your fingertips in your department, right? You want your LMS to talk to your HRIS. You want to be able to link your learning initiatives and what's happening in learning with whether it's performance, whether it's talent management, whether it's overall employee retention, maybe it's internal mobility, maybe it's promotion rate, to your point about making sure that people are really rewarded for engaging with the initiatives that you're trying to push. And then there's also the business conversation. That's the people layer, right? Then there's the business conversation. We're talking about inviting yourself to the table to talk about, strategic talent initiatives. We're talking about, I'm a marketer, right? I love storytelling. We're talking about storytelling to your executives about why now, right? To some of the questions that have come in, like, how, if my budget is decreasing year over year, how do I go back to the table and make the argument that like now is actually the time that we need to be investing more, not less in learning? How do you
Mhm.
sort of help the team here think about, okay, really tactically, how do I tell that story at the business level in a way that's going to get my leaders to wake up and pay attention?
Mm. I will give you, I'm also a storyteller at heart, and I will give you my favorite storytelling framework. You should be using this for every business case you make. First step is describe the world in a way in which everyone can agree. This is where we're at. This is what's like literally in a way that like nobody can argue with. Describe the world in a way in which everyone can agree. And when we're talking about people and skills with a shelf life, and how fast the world of work and the nature of jobs and tasks and AI and all this stuff, like how fast everything is changing, like describing the world in a way, like everybody will nod their heads in violent agreement with
Yep.
the, sort of the state of people, skills, the world, technology advancement, all of that. And then you go into sort of the pain, then you've got to like create the wound a little bit. Because of that, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. And the consequence of not solving that pain is this. And that's, I mean, that's the really rich part of your business case. The top level stuff, describe the world. Yep, we're all on the same page. We start there. Do we all agree on the pain? And most importantly, do we all understand the consequence? The consequence of not making that pain go away, or worse, letting it increase. And then you get to tell your hero story. Then you get to tell everybody, I think I have a solution. And it's a vetted, like, this is the reason I think this will work and what I think will happen. We've tested it. It's tried and true. Mercer gave me all the stats, whatever it is, but this is the solution to that problem. And I highly recommend we start tomorrow and we test. You've got to prove it out constantly. I hate it when people put a solution in place and they walk away like, there, we did the thing. No, you probably haven't unless you've tried and tested your assumptions with your actual people. Were these the right strategies? Did this do the thing that we wanted? Like, we also kind of make too many assumptions. If you have a lot of frontline hourly workers, how they access solutions you give them will probably surprise you. Our research shows, and I mentioned this at the top of the conversation, most people don't even feel they have manager support or a sense of permission to spend time learning and developing themselves while they're on the clock, so to speak. How are you going to fix that? And so be willing to sort of test some assumptions that you might go in with your solution design, and be willing, like, you've got to design for change. Be willing to iterate and reiterate and try something different. Do people like accessing things on mobile? Do they feel like they need to do this at a desktop? Does everybody have a desktop? Like, you've got to, it's okay to go in with some assumptions, but be willing to test and test again, and probably invite more people into the conversation than you think you need to make sure that you've got some valid assumptions. But so that's where I would start with that business case. Spend a lot of time in the pain and consequences. And that's where there's tons of research out there to support you about how short that shelf life is of talent and their skills and what they can contribute to the business. Again, if you're not constantly building that, nurturing that, we're pets. We're not rocks. We need watering and walking and nurturing, and like, you've got to take care of us or over time. You can't just let something sit and go stagnant.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably not your first foray into some sort of learning initiative, or maybe it is your first formal L&D foray, but that you have, a groundswell of managers or business leaders who've been trying to upskill their teams, and now you're trying to pull it together. I mean, a great tip that I learned from an ex-head of L&D of mine was make friends with a manager who's really learning focused, or a business leader who's really learning focused and who's already started a program like this, because what you can do is you can take one of their folks as a great case study, and you can say, hey, this person acquired this skill, and with that skill they went on to build this for the organization, and the ultimate value of that big thing that they built for the organization was X, or X million dollars, or X hours saved, or X, whatever. Folks love an anecdote, right? They love a personal story, right? You can highlight a great success and celebrate a great success, not only of the learner, but of the executive who championed the program, to say, this is why we need to do this at scale, right? And I also think, it's a great opportunity for you to work with the folks outside of your own maybe organization to think about how you tell the story really well. Your marketing friends are there to support you in helping you tell a great story. Your sales enablement friends, or even your sales leaders, a lot of what we're talking about in building a business case is very similar to like selling methodology that you might have if you happen to work in a B2B organization, right?
Totally.
Sandler or Challenger Sale or MedPick or whatever your organization uses, if you happen to be in an organization that looks like this, which I know not everyone in the chat would be, but if you have a standard for how your team sells stuff on to customers, use the standard to sell it internally to your own executive audience. I promise you'll win a couple of brownie points along the way.
Yeah. And I dropped this into the chat. The other thing is understanding the right measures of success. I see this with solutions all the time, whether it's technology, an actual system that people log into and adopt, or whether it's like a program that you're hoping will get uptake, or a policy change, or whatever it is. We look for adoption. Did we do the thing? People log in. Did they see the tool I gave them? That is not a measure of success. You might pat yourself on the back for adoption, meaning people are using it, but it's such a fleeting moment, honestly, and it doesn't really tell you anything. It can be an indicator that you're moving in the right direction, but a true measure of success, especially for a learning strategy, a true measure of success is whether or not this makes any difference whatsoever to the business and to the workforce experience. Did it increase performance and drive impact for the business that we need and want? And from an individual perspective, did it keep them longer? Did it make them better? Did it a lot better align them to team performance? Did it do that? And did it improve their experience of work? Like, workforce experience is a real thing. Did it make it easier for me to perform? Did it make me better aligned to the energy of the business? And so sort of like what did this do? Whether or not I created a profile and logged into a system and completed a couple of courses, okay, that tells me a little, not a lot. Go for the right measures of success and make sure you can tie that story back to the business.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. I recently went to a Hardcore HR community event. That's the HiBob community. And I was sitting with customers, and one of them was telling me that they took a risk and they finally sold through this idea that they were going to do training for the next level of leaders in their organization. They were going to do a VP program. And it was expensive, right? It didn't have the classic adoption metrics. All the VPs were going, they were flying them somewhere, right? They were sitting there, they were having them sit through these days of workshops and learning how to work together and learning about the business strategy and all this stuff. So they were looking for, okay, adoption's 100%, right? But how do I tell the story back to the business? What they landed on, actually, which she said worked really well, was they had, following the event, they had the VPs go back and work, for a quarter or so. And then they invited them to their CEO's executive staff to read out how they were applying the skills that they had learned a quarter before in their everyday jobs since returning from the program. And so to your point about, finding a new sort of like framing for success, it was really meaningful to hear that personal case study from leading VPs in the organization who said, yes, I got a lot out of that, very expensive investment that you made in me, right? And I applied it when I got home. And here's a couple of cool things that I learned how to do. I'm working closer with my peers. I'm implementing, new technology. I'm, taking that durable skill, that essential skill that I learned, and I'm coaching my team differently. I think it's a really interesting way of sort of thinking outside of the box about, how do you demonstrate that something is working in your organization?
Yeah. And to that, I know we're getting close to time. Don't forget, so we're talking about how people learn. We're talking about learning. If you measured me, I'm just going to throw myself on the sword here. If you measured me as being a good corporate citizen by how much corporate learning content I consumed this year, it would look like I'm sitting on my hands. It would, like, I don't even know, like, I probably have done all the required stuff. I think maybe, I don't know. I'd have to go.
So.
I might even be non-compliant. But how much did I actually spend time learning this year? Holy crap. I'm one of our thought leaders on AI and the future of work. I do most of my learning outside of anything our corporate learning people can see and measure. that's important to know because you have to kind of find a way to get at that. Like, how are people figuring out how to arm themselves and do their jobs better and go where the puck is going, not where it is? The other important part of that is creating space for peer knowledge dissemination, because there's probably like really amazing sort of self-driven learning and development and upskilling happening in pockets. Are you finding ways to get that out and among bigger teams and into the organization? Worry about measuring it too later, maybe, but unlock that, because I guarantee most of our, like, the way we do things at work, I always say, what year is it inside of work, outside of work, 2024? What year does it feel like inside of work? Like,
Yep.
people are probably figuring stuff out. They're using their phones, they're using Chat GPT, they're YouTubing stuff, they're asking their peers, they're just figuring it out. They're going to their network. There's all kinds of learning and professional development that's happening that you didn't design and you're not measuring, but it's still okay. And you probably do want to know about it so you can make that work for people too. How are we training each other? So I would not that learning people don't have enough to do and figure out, but don't forget that, like, don't just get stuck in like how we've always done things. Be thinking about how humans actually live and work and use devices and engage with each other. Like, think about the last time you had to figure out how to make a new recipe or even find a new recipe. How did you do it? You probably didn't go to like your corporate learning system and look up rigatoni. Just like think about how we actually, like, don't forget we're people, and how do we figure stuff out in our life, and then think about how to make that a little bit more seamless and frictionless in a work environment.
Yeah, it's also, it helps you with there's a tremendous burden on L&D folks sometimes around content creation and being the subject matter expert, or having to find the content, right, that your employees can get value from. I mean, shout out to my HiBob talent and learning team and our Bob Ed program, who I'm proudly repping on today's call. They very quickly recognize, for example, that, public speaking is something that lots of people want to learn. And gosh, don't I do a lot of public speaking? And is there a way that, in addition to sort of the one-on-one coaching, that we could maybe make a more formal program where I'm doing the lifting on creating the content, or, taking content that I'm already, working on with my team for folks who speak on our behalf and translating that into something that can be used internally. I mean, there's lots of different ways of getting learning content. And I think your call out that, learning can take many forms, especially for those of us who are in that realistic scenario where budgets are, I think Mercer's data said, something like 18% lower on average for L&D looking out to next year, which is such a tremendous shame. But if that is the reality of your situations, you can get creative about what learning content means to your organization. It's such an opportunity, especially for folks who are small businesses or maybe working in nonprofits or other areas where you don't have the big budgets to play with, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite stories it's not even a learning story, it's more of a culture change transformation, is Microsoft. When Satya Nadella came to the helm, he did a massive reorg, which probably just sounds like a tactical administrative, just a necessary evil of doing business. But what he really needed to achieve was not a reorg. It was a complete cultural transformation. And he transformed Microsoft from a know-it-all culture into a learn-it-all culture. And one of the ways he did that was create a hackathon, internal hackathons, permission to fail, permission to experiment, share what you learn, share what you know, and some of those ideas take hold and they become innovative. They become products. They become better ways of delivering customer experience. So that took Microsoft from, old hardware company to cloud computing and AI company. That was a learning culture. That was a cultural transformation. And it wasn't a bunch of required courses that were designed out and we measured course completion as a measure of success. That was a transformation that, granted it's Microsoft, but if HiBob wants to become a bigger brand and announce a learning product to the market in 2024, public speaking is a great initiative. I need a bunch of learning SMEs. I want a bunch of people who want to learn public speaking. That top-down strategic activation that says, and now we need to go provide strategic learning to a bunch of people so we can achieve that goal. That makes a lot more sense, and you'll get a lot more uptake when you take that approach.
Yeah, Robert made a great comment in the chat. We have an open invitation for anyone to teach others what they know. It took some time to make this part of our culture, but now we have people creating internal courses regularly, including even our interns. Oh my gosh. Employees love learning from their coworkers and see that they can participate as experts too, which everybody loves that little ego boost, right? We used to have to ask people to teach, and now it's become part of the culture. I
Oh,
mean, yeah, cheers, Robert. That's an incredible case study. Jess,
yeah.
we're right here. You know, we're wrapping up. We got just a few minutes left. We'll let everybody get back to their normal day, or maybe the protected time that they've carved out for learning. Really glad that folks have joined us for maybe some of that protected time. Thank you for taking the opportunity to jump on and learn a little bit with us today, and share your learnings with all of us in the chat. It's been so great to have you. But Jess, maybe if there's anything that you sort of want to end today's conversation, make sure that we don't miss, or anything that you want to plug, please send us home.
Yeah, for sure. And this was a fireside chat. This was a conversation. We didn't want to throw a bunch of slides in front of you, but I do recognize that I pulled from a couple of really good stats, and a lot of you were asking for those slides. That is our HR Tech Impact on the Workforce report. And there are 2 or 3 slides in there. If you are literally trying to articulate a business case, get budget, get leadership alignment, get buy-in, there are some really juicy stats in there. And so I think it was linked. This is a public URL. You can go find the report, and it's in there. Yes, I have it as slides too. Just ask us. We'll send it out as well. But that HR Tech Impact on the Workforce report speaks about the skills gap, the learning gap, sort of how we all try to access it differently. Like, again, to challenge your assumptions. And this is like the voice of the workforce. So it's super helpful. So I would say that's a great resource for you. Otherwise, connect with both of us on LinkedIn. We talk about talent stuff, strategies, activating the workforce all the time, both Sarah and I. So please consider this your community to learn and evolve your thinking as well.
Yeah, all the links to the materials that Jess mentioned are in the resource center on the Zoom. So please take advantage of those before you disconnect today. Jess, if folks want to say hi to you, where can they find you on social channels or on the web?
Well, sometimes I hide, but not very often. I am active on social, especially LinkedIn. If you love diverse daisies and youth development, you should go follow that on Instagram if you need some happy stuff this week. But otherwise, yeah, I'm everywhere. Jess Von Bank on social media.
Awesome. If folks want to say hi to me, you can find me on LinkedIn /Sarah Liz Reynolds, or tweeting into the void as the ship goes down on the artist formerly known as Twitter @FairPayMonster. If you want to say hi, yes, exactly. I'm holding on. If I might be the last one. If you want to say hi to Bob, we would love to walk you through our approach to connecting learning to all of that great data in your organization. You can visit HiBob.com. My team has also pushed a poll. If you would love us to follow up with additional information, or even to schedule a demo, you can let us know there, and the team will be back in touch. We've really appreciated having everyone on today's call. It's only the start of a great conversation, I am sure. So thank you so much for everybody taking the time here on a Thursday in a busy week to come and chat with us. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you on social, on the Now at Work meetup, on lots of different channels. So thank you so much, team.
Oh, and Sarah, thanks for agreeing to be on our show tomorrow. Yeah,
of course. I'm looking forward to it.
You guys need more of this in another community. Come join us tomorrow. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think Leah's going to put the link in the chat for folks who don't know that channel. It's going to be another very informal, conversation based. We have a lot of chat activity. We have a lot of folks who can sometimes participate and come off mute. So it's great to have you. We'd love to see you again tomorrow. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.